I believe you had that prophecy yesterday, David.
Yeah, well, it's not. You don't need to be any genius to have that prophecy. If you've watched Mitch over the years, I give Mitch credit for what he did in the Supreme Court nominations, because he stood tough there and got them done, and a couple other things. But when it comes to spending,
we're not going to call you Nostradamus or Kreskin at this point.
No, you don't need to be either one of those to know that they're going to fold like a cheap suit, because they always do. Live from Studio 6B on a Monday night. Glad you're in. Dish Network Channel 219, Pluto TV Channel 247. Paul's here with news. Sabrina's got entertainment. Rick's going to have sports. Rick Delgado's here. Please now welcome back to the show. I don't get to say that about many guests. Welcome back to the show. Tom Basile, speaker, commentator, and author, of course, of the new book, Let That Sink In. And he's back. Tom, how are you?
Great. You know, guys, I was just leaving my poetry reading in Times Square, and I saw Don Lemon. How does that happen?
Yeah.
You know, so,
like
crazy
my
stuff goes on.
Yeah, it's like fifth grade poetry night at the middle school here. With the dramatic pauses. Oh, God. So
good to be with you.
Yeah, good to have you back. So you have a great article that came out on Fox Business about something that we have been discussing here on the show. Not in exactly the context that you wrote about it. It's entitled Coronavirus Bailouts Must Have Requirements to Ensure Blue States Finally Reform. And, I've talked consistently on this show about the fact that, future generations should not have to bear the massive debt of what's going on in this government right now. And Mitch McConnell, for as good as he's been on Supreme Court justices and things like that, where he has stood tough and basically did what he had to do to get it done, on spending, he's been a disaster. It's just the basis of it. So before we talk about that, give me the essence of what you wrote about in Fox Business.
Well, sure. And look, this is pretty much common sense. If you've got a crazy uncle who's got 4 DUIs and a gambling problem, and he comes to you and he wants a blank check, you don't give it to him. That's the way that this really should work. And Washington needs to take a clue from what is basically a common sense approach. All right, you've got blue states, and the president's right about this. It is primarily blue states that are going to Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and saying, hey, we've got big problems. We have been exposed for financial mismanagement. We want to throw money at as many programs as we possibly can. We've been doing it for years. We have failed to reform our programs and our public employee contracts. And we're bordering on insolvency. We want taxpayers in Texas and Kansas and Oklahoma and North Carolina and Florida and Wisconsin and Minnesota to come in and pay for all of that. And we're going to use the coronavirus as the excuse to do it. Now, look, I'm not saying, Damon, that state and local governments are going to need some assistance coming out of this, but Americans need to stand up now and say, look, no blank checks. No blank checks, no unrestricted money. That's what Andrew Cuomo wants. He wants unrestricted money.
Yeah.
And these are states that have refused to reform for decades. Andrew Cuomo, everybody's singing his praises of late. He's increased his state budget by $40 billion since he took office. $40 billion. He's refused to reform Medicaid, which is the most expensive program in the country, education, any of his public employee union contracts. Bill de Blasio's added 30,000 municipal workers to the payroll and increased his budget by 30%. Gavin Newsom is spending billions of dollars on sanctuary policies and public welfare programs to encourage illegal immigration into his state. And J.B. Pritzker would rather raise taxes 20 times than reform his public pension system, which, wait for it, is $240 billion in the hole. So these are the folks and their congressional delegations that are going to be putting a tremendous amount of pressure on Congress to get that money. And it's fundamentally unfair unless there are serious strings attached.
Yeah, it's fundamentally unfair. It's fundamentally against liberty. It's the states that have done the worst job, that have their hands, quote unquote, around the throat of the people who live there continuously. Yeah. It gives no incentive to get the economy opened up by doing this. And you see all these, it's amazing. You know, they were in this fake federalism debate, all these governors, just how long ago?
Right.
3 weeks ago.
Right.
And now, you know, anytime they even talk about opening up, like DeSantis gets viciously attacked. There's no incentive to open up. It's anti-liberty, it's anti-freedom, it's anti all of this stuff. But yet, again, it comes back to, here we go. Mitch, what's Mitch going to do?
Right. And look, I wrote a column around the time of the impeachment. I believe it was either on Newsmax or Fox News, saying that Mitch McConnell would jeopardize his majority if he didn't have the president's back on impeachment. And to McConnell's credit, he largely did. But I think that if he goes for $1 trillion Pelosi grab bag of nonsense and gives these states, these deep blue states, who are in violation of federal law when it comes to immigration, when it comes to drug policy, or who support offensive policies to most of America, like late-term abortion or taxpayer-funded abortion. If he gives a blank check to those states and capitulates, even if he's bargaining for a payroll tax cut, which I think is what is probably the dynamic that's going to develop here, he is going to risk losing his majority because there will be a conservative backlash. He's got to be careful about that. So I'm trying to be a little bit more optimistic than you, Damon, because I have seen him come through in the past, and this isn't just about the spending addiction in Washington or in the blue state.
He gets good marks on what you on judges on some things, but you don't get a pass on bankrupting the country. For the most part, he's been a massive debt creator. He was the quote unquote firewall for 8 years of Obama, did a lousy job. He's now the leader in the Senate, and it's more of the same. And I think you're right. I think he's I don't know, you know, if he loses the majority, I guess that's up for debate, but he's on spending, he really has been a disaster as far as I'm concerned.
Well, you got to look. I bring up the political point because what really motivates these guys, whether or not they're going to be able to win re-election. All right, and if you capitulate and you're going to take money from a swing state where you've got a guy who or a senator who's up for re-election, and that person then votes to give $50 billion to Andrew Cuomo and Bill de Blasio, the communist and mayor of New York City, that's going to be hung around that person's neck like an albatross. And what you'll do is you'll have Democrats that'll run ads telling conservative voters, don't vote for this person because they betrayed you. And so he's got a very, very difficult political situation here. And again, I'm not saying that he shouldn't be offering any types of state and local aid, but it has to have certain strings attached, whether it's reform, whether it's a loan, whether it's some form of accountability. But you're absolutely right. You can't spend your way out of debt, and you can't spend your way to prosperity either. That just doesn't work historically.
And you've named all of them. It's Cuomo in New York, it's Pritzker in Illinois, it's Murphy in New Jersey. And as we said earlier in the show, they're all elected in these one-party states, and it's either because like Newsom, they're just either next in line, or they're got a lot of money like the New Jersey, or Cuomo's got the name, and it's just they're the ones who do the worst. And the light has been really this pandemic has really brought some of them into the forefront and how bad it's been. Not only their response, like Cuomo, New York, and you know, he gets asked no serious questions by the media on New York's preparedness, some of the decisions he's made on nursing homes, some of the decisions he's made on mass transit. He gets asked no serious. Oh, he should be get rid of Biden. Let's get him up there. Why? Because he has nice charts and graphs.
Remember something, Damon. He was $6 billion in the hole.
Yeah, before this.
When coming into this year. Look, the press corps in Albany are afraid of Andrew Cuomo. They are afraid of being frozen out. They treat him with kid gloves. They always have. You're absolutely right. I watch the press conferences. There are no tough questions. Andrew Cuomo's own hospital commission earlier this year recommended cutting aid to hospitals by $400 million. The New York State Legislature just passed a $176 billion budget, twice the size of the state of Florida's, with no provisions for any sort of state aid to local municipalities with respect to COVID-19. There's no aid coming from the states. They just want their handout from the federal government. They've turned into the biggest welfare recipients or potential welfare recipients we've ever seen.
Yeah. Sometimes it concerns me. I think the president's instinct is always, he knows what's right. And when you talk about things like subsidizing unions, non-unions, all the things they're looking to subsidize now in the name of, oh, everybody needs help. I think the president's instinct is always right in that he knows instinctively that that's not the thing to do. But I fear sometimes that he has people like Mnuchin and Navarro and people who think that this big government, centralized government intervention, it's really not, it's okay. You know, that's like their attitude towards it. Does that concern you?
It does, because and it concerns me because this has been a long-standing problem. It was a problem when I was in the Bush administration. It's been a problem since the Great Society programs, where we had a massive explosion of the size of the federal government, and there is very little political courage. And that's one of the reasons why I think that this is an opportunity for Americans to engage with their members of Congress and say, hey, don't do this. No blank checks. None of this pulling this money out of the sky to go to these deep blue states and just giving them a handout. And it's also a lesson for places like North Carolina and Texas, where are people who are fleeing by the millions, California and New York. They're going to North Carolina, they're going to South Carolina, they're going to Texas. And the lesson from COVID-19 and looking at these states and just how bad a situation they are in financially is take a look at your own backyard and commit yourself to ensuring that that does not happen to you, because you're seeing a population explosion in your area. And we need to start, in these red and these purple states, you need to start thinking about that. You're only one generation away, really, from being another New York or California.
Yeah. I know you have a couple other articles out. Talk to me about I was interested in the one that I think you have out in Newsmax. Don't let liberal media, because we were speaking of Don Lemon before, use virus to eradicate the American spirit. That's a great title, and I think it's so true because, I think there's some in the media who, like you said, whether they're not really interested in whether the country's opening or not opening. They're not interested in the people who are suffering because they look at most of them as blue-collar Trump supporters, so they don't care. So give me the essence of what you mean by that in that article, by that title.
Just be proud. Really, be proud. We're taught today by the media. If you're transgender, you should be proud. If you're this, you should be proud. If you're an immigrant, you should be proud. Well, people should be proud of who they are. But when it comes to patriotism, when it comes to loving your country, there has been a decided shift in the last 10 to 15 years in this country that America should be defined by what's wrong with it, by its challenges, and not by its exceptionalism.
So
and not
right
by
on the
its
money.
People.
So right. 8 years of apologetic, running around the world apologizing for the country.
Yep.
I got 10 seconds, Tom. I'll give you the last word. 10 seconds.
Reagan saw this coming, and read his speech where he talks about this from the 1980s, about stripping away of the essence of America by the people who control popular culture. And he talked about, he's right on the money, and that's exactly where we are.
I hope your book's doing great. I hope these articles are doing great. Love having you on this show, and we'll definitely have you back. Tom Basile, live from Studio 6B. We're back right after this.